All right, so going back to, and I don't know why that's not updating it, but going back to the video yesterday, like I said, you don't have to use sugar for energy. It is the way your body's designed. However, your body will use other things. So the first other thing your body can use is protein. What are the building blocks of protein? Amino acids. That's great, because my last class did not know that. The amino acids, which look like this. They have this on the left, this in the middle, and then that. That's what an amino acid looks like. Now, if you remember, the thing about an amino acid is if we compare that to a sugar, technically the only thing that's not a carbon, hydrogen, or oxygen is this, the amino group. So if we get rid of that, although the R group in some cases can have other stuff, if we get rid of that, we're basically left with carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, the same thing that sugar had. So that's exactly what our body would do. Our body would do what's called deamination, which is to remove the hydrogen. And then it takes the carbon that's left, the carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and it turns it into groups that can go straight to the Krebs cycle. So we basically avoid glycolysis. However, I will make one real quick comment about deamination. That means that if you're on a high protein diet, you're making lots of ammonia. The more proteins you eat, the more deamination you do, the more ammonia you make. Remember, fish can make ammonia, not a problem. They live in water, they flush it out. It's highly toxic. We can't. So what we do is we take ammonia, we turn it into urea. Urea is then flushed out of the kidneys. That's what urine is. That's what where the name urine comes from, is from urea. So the more urea you make, the more water you should drink, because urea is toxic and your kidneys need lots of water to flush it out. People on high protein diets, if they don't drink a lot of water, they will have kidney damage. This is what makes urine yellow as well. So if you're drinking lots of water, you'll notice urine is probably very clear. It's almost watery. But if you eat lots and lots of protein and don't drink a lot of water, you end up with, see Jeremy drinking his water. You end up with a lot of urea in your urine, and it's very, very yellow, and it's really bad for your kidneys because they're trying to filter out this urea. So just a comment about when you do use proteins. The other thing you can use is lipids. So lipids get broken into fatty acids. I don't know how much you remember, again, from biochemistry, but a fatty acid, saturated or unsaturated, was basically a long chain of nothing but carbon and hydrogen. Now, what did we say was the only part of glucose that actually ends up in the electron transport chain? Right, the hydrogen. And so if you've got nothing but super, super long chains of carbon and hydrogen, that means lipids actually have more energy than carbs do. And we've talked about lipids being high in calories and high in energy. This is the reason why. Because lipids contain long chains of hydrogen, which means we can make even more NAD and FAD, which means we can make even more ATP, double in some cases, the amount of ATP that you could make from a carb. And they're designed that way for storage, so that if you want to store excess energy, you don't need as much space. We'll just pack lots of hydrogens into a small amount of space, and we can store energy. We don't typically need all the energy in a fatty acid, but if you're on a diet, you'll go back in and you'll start using these fatty acids. You basically will literally turn them into acetyl-CoA. You'll basically just break them into little 2-carbon acetyl groups. And from there, you can make, they gave a number of 44, but online you can read it can be much higher than that, just depending, because fatty acids can be various lengths. The longer the fatty acids, obviously, the more ATP can be made. But the idea is, these are our alternate sources. So when we go to the video from yesterday about the little boy, that's how they were getting around his problem of not being able to get from pyruvate to acetyl-CoA. They put him on a diet that was high in proteins and lipids, which means he probably did have issues with making a lot of urea. He probably did have to drink a lot of water, but obviously that's better than damaging the muscles and nerves. So,
if
yes.
Lipids have more energy than the carbs, why do we use
Carbs for energy?
Yeah.
The thing is, carbs are nice little packets of energy. They have a very nice amount for what the cell needs, and they're readily available. They're very easy. They flow through our blood. We can store them as glycogen in the liver. Fat, the way fat gets stored, it's stored in such a way that it's harder to get to. So it's designed to store large amounts of energy in small amounts of space, but it's really not designed to be quickly broken down. So carbs are better as far as our quick energy source. Lipids are specifically designed for storing it. Not as readily, available, easily accessible, but they're perfect for storing because they don't take up a lot of space. Okay, so that's other energy sources. This is just a diagram showing what I just said. Proteins, here's amino acids. They can get converted to acetyl-CoA, get rid of the amino group, that's ammonia, it could become urea. And then here's fats, they break into fatty acids and glycerol. We talked about glycerol a little bit, it actually will go into glycolysis, but the main thing is the fatty acids, they'll get broken into acetyl-CoA. The idea is just that these are alternate pathways. You don't have to memorize this picture. You should understand what the picture is showing, but you don't have to memorize any of the words. All right, and this, you don't have to know this name either. I'm not going to ask you on a test what's the name of the enzyme that limits the glycolysis pathway. It's called phosphofructokinase. Make you sound really smart. Just walk around. I learned about phosphofructokinase today. But you wouldn't be asked to memorize the name. What you could be asked, though, is you could be told about the enzyme and then asked, how is it behaving? Well, what phosphofructokinase does is if there's a whole lot of ATP, ATP is an allosteric inhibitor of phosphofructokinase, which means ATP basically shuts the enzyme down. What's that an example of? Where a product goes back and shuts it down.
Negative feedback.
That's negative feedback. So the reason I show this to you is not so you'll memorize that word, not so you'll even memorize this step, that what it does, it converts fructose 6-phosphate to fructose 1,6-biphosphate. You don't have to know that. All you have to understand is if I talk to you about phosphofructokinase and I talk about ATP being an inhibitor of it, you need to understand, well, why would it need to be inhibited? Because if you have too much ATP, it'll shut the pathway down. You'll send that sugar to become glycogen or something else instead. You want to maintain homeostasis. And so that's the only reason that I show you this slide. You're not going to be tested on knowing, you don't even have to know that it's an allosteric inhibitor. You should know what an allosteric inhibitor is. You should know what ATP is. If I tell you that phosphofructokinase is in glycolysis, you should know it's an enzyme because it ends in ase. So there's certain little things that you need to understand, but memorizing the words is not going to be important.
Do fatty acids